Hello, everybody. I'm Dan Basse, president of AgResource Company, joined by our climate scientist, Dr. Scott Yuknis, with his presentation on what he sees as being something very interesting regarding South America. AgResource has known Scott for a long time. We're very friendly with each other. You can find his forecasts on our app and our website. And I've always seen Scott as one of the best forecasters in America, for that matter, the world. He gives us those hot spots that agricultural community really needs to pay attention to it weeks and months in advance. So with that introduction, Scott, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dan. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Yes, we are looking at some concerns in South America for drought conditions. And you know, we've seen several droughts in the last 10 years across South America. Normally, we're looking at La Nina and El Nino as big drivers of that climate regime, but there's a few other things out there that are helping to inspire these conditions. And I wanted to review those with you today. So what I have here is a PowerPoint that shows some of the graphics that we're looking at, some of the model runs and so forth. We'll run through all of that with you over the next few minutes. You know, we first start out with the soil moisture conditions, of course, and, you know, we see an area of dryness that's pretty dominant over eastern Paraguay, southeast Brazil, northeast Argentina. It's been very wet to the north across most of Brazil, so they've enjoyed beneficial rain and the ability to lose a long-term drought to the north. But this southern area, soybeans and corn, all the major crops from southeast Brazil into northeast Argentina are a concern of mine going forward through the summer season. Over the last 90 days, it has been quite dry over far southeastern portions of Brazil and into northeast Argentina. And our concern is that dryness is going to expand and the wet pattern in Brazil is going to start diminishing. In the next slide, you know, before we get to the forecast, you know, we did see a flash drought late last summer. And that's one thing I'm very concerned about the upcoming summer. Are we going to see that condition again? One way to determine whether that's going to happen or not is whether the deep layer soil moisture conditions are dry. Now, sometimes the data to determine that, and I'm talking about 10 to 200 centimeter depth, sometimes the data to determine that isn't readily available or not completely accurate, but there are some ways to determine whether that soil moisture layer is dry. And essentially, and it makes sense, just long-term rainfall. Now, in 2021 so far, we still have a few days left in 2021. It's been dry for the most part over southeast Brazil. And last year, it was very dry in that same location. So going forward, the deep layer soil moisture conditions are dry over southeast portions of Brazil, eastern Paraguay, far northeast Argentina, and the climate models are showing that a dry scenario is expected in that region for the bulk of upcoming summer. So we're going to have the combination of a dry climate and some deep layer soil moisture reduction, and that combination can cause a flash drought. So later in January into February, we're going to be looking for that oncoming drought very quickly at that time. Now, everyone likes to know what's happening with ENSO when we talk about South America climate forecasts. That's certainly important. La Nina is out there. Expected to peak in January. All the models, as you can see, have January peak intensity for La Nina. And we do have La Nina underway now. It's starting to intensify. I would classify it as moderate intensity right now. We should see more intensity to this regime going through the next, I would say 6 weeks or so. But after January, it's going to start losing some of its intensity. Now, during La Nina, typically Brazil is wet, especially the northern portion of Brazil. That certainly has been happening. But we have another feature that's become actually more dominant, I would say, over the last several months and led to the Brazilian wet climate. And that's the wet tropical South Atlantic regime. We've had record warm sea surface temperature anomalies beginning last June through last July and August, lingering right up to now. And that has led to wet trade winds combined with La Nina has led to this extraordinary wet Brazil climate, central and northern portions, northeast portions of Brazil. Now, something interesting has happened, Dan, over the last couple of weeks. That very strong warm signature of the tropical South Atlantic index has suddenly weakened. We've been up around maybe plus 0.7. That's probably 2 standard deviations, a very strong warm signature. But over the last couple of weeks, 3 weeks or so, we've seen a decline in the tropical South Atlantic index of minus 0.48. That's a big change. So it's cooling off out there. So that means that part of the wet catalyst to the climate in Brazil is weakening very rapidly. So we do think that the wet signature that we've been seeing in Brazil is going to start fading as we go into the new year. Now, there's another aspect of the sea surface temperature anomaly pattern that's really important. In my view, it's more important than La Nina. If we look offshore, the east coast of South America right now, we have a big warm blob, as they're called, of water to the east of Argentina. And over that big warm blob, it's high pressure. Now, if that high pressure extends into Argentina towards Paraguay later this summer, we will see very hot weather and dryness. I think that will happen. But that's not the feature I'm looking at right now. Right now, what we're looking at is the cool water just to the north of that warm blob, southeast of Brazil. And notice that in the tropics, it's still warm, although not as warm as it has been. Over that cool water, we've had a persistent low pressure trough. And you look at a satellite picture from today, we still have that low pressure trough just off the coast. Look at all that cloudiness just off the coast, extending northwestward into Brazil, more Brazilian rains in this pattern. This pattern just isn't going anywhere. And a lot of times you can correlate the location of this upper trough to waters that are cooler than normal, which is the case east-southeast of Brazil. So this is the pattern going forward into summer. Now, to compensate for all that wet arc of moisture that's riding into northeast Brazil, which will continue over the next couple of months, the atmosphere compensates with subsidence over southeast Brazil and Argentina. And you can see that today it's very dry, clear skies. It's starting to get really hot in these areas. So this pattern, while keeping northeast Brazil wet, is going to have just the opposite effect on Argentina and southeast Brazil, and that's dryness. If you look at today's 15-day outlook, it seems like every day looks the same. The 15-day outlooks, this is from the GFS from midday today, shows a dry climate across Argentina up into southeast Brazil. And now we're starting to get very hot temperatures to accompany that dryness. So oncoming drought, it's on the way. It's the perfect conditions for that to develop. And as I said earlier, a flash drought, a rapidly intensifying drought is possible once we get into the second half of January and into February. The climate forecasts issued a week or two ago show that January is indeed dry and hot across Argentina. This dry and hot signature is probably going to extend a little bit further north than what's shown here, right into southeast Brazil. And then we get to February, and then the anomalies in the climate forecast, a bit more dramatic and I believe accurate, showing dryness and anomalous heat over Argentina up into southeast Brazil. And this same regime is going to carry right through the end of summer into early next autumn with more dryness and heat across Argentina up into southeast Brazil. And if you take a look at next autumn, which would be March, April, May, this regime gets even stronger. So once we go into this regime, it's going to slowly expand and it's not going to reverse. This warmer, hotter than normal regime with dryness up into certainly in Argentina, up into southeast Brazil, and probably further north into eastern Brazil with time. This is an ongoing developing pattern we expect over summer. It's going to expand, and the wet regime that we've seen over Brazil these last several months is going to be a past memory. The wet weather will be shifting up into northwest portions of the continent as we get into Q2 of next year. So Dan, what we're looking at here is a threatening situation. It's in its infancy right now. But all the support, it's a pretty confident forecast. Everything that we're looking at right now continues to support this dryness and anomalous heat developing. Argentina is the first target, southeast Brazil the second target, and things I think get a bit more intense, potential flash drought once we get well into January and into February. So the wet pattern that we've been seeing in Brazil is going to fade and dryness coming on strong for upcoming summer.
Thank you, Scott. That's a very interesting forecast. The one thing that really stands out to me in your projections is we catch 3 crops in a row. The first corn crop in Brazil, the soybean crop, but then the safrinha or the winter corn crop, which would be April, May, and potentially June. Boy, that would be really important for the world grain markets. Thank you again for that great presentation. My only question is, what would we look for this pattern to change? I don't see any change through May. I guess we have to wait till the winter season of next year.
I don't see this pattern changing at all. And again, one thing I would tell traders and analysts to be focusing on is some of these large areas of ocean water that are very warm, very cool on either side of the coast of South America, because they're having greater influence on the South America climate than ENSO. So those conditions are really important. The forecast that we talked about today, if it were to change, we would see the waters to the east-southeast of Brazil warming up, and we don't expect that to happen. The La Nina is out there for another, I'd say 3-4 months, and that's going to weaken. We might even be talking about El Nino late in 2022. So that could bring a change to what we talked about today, but that's way off. That's late next year.
Well, I know on your newsletter every day you're going to update with your research clients, and thank you, Scott. Happy holidays to you, and happy holidays to all that are watching. We'll be back at AgResource with other videos forthcoming, but we really appreciate Scott's time to outline what could be a very troubling weather pattern for the next 3 or 4 months. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Dan.